Right, everyone, this is my WRAITH Nightblade Tank Build, and this is obviously usable in the Firesong DLC. So you're going to get a good amount of time out of this build. There's not really going to be any updates to the game until around March, so you're going to get some good use from playing this particular build. The things that I've done with this, it's just a bit of fun. It's designed for 4-man content. It's not really aimed at like endgame trials and things like that. It is aimed 4-person content. It uses decent gear sets to provide group buffs. It's fun to play, so give it a try. For the race, obviously I'm a Nord. This is to stack up my max health. It stacks up my max stamina. It gives me more resistances. One of the important things here is the ulti game. So I have kind of aimed this build at ulti generation. It's going to generate a lot of ultimate quite quickly. So this is why I've gone with this particular build. Now, another thing you could do with it being a Nightblade tank is you could use an Argonian, because you use an Argonian with the Nightblade, and the Nightblade has a potion passive. When you drink a potion, you get 20 ultimate. So if you combine this build with an Argonian to get more resources back, that would be an option if you wanted to, but I personally have just gone with the ulti gain from this one instead. And then obviously, like I say, we get the other benefits as well. On the actual character, as you can see here, we've got the Ancient Mundus stone, which is going to increase our magic recovery by 535. That's because of the certain traits that we're using on our gear. And on our consumables, I've got Red Froth Gar. Quite like this food, actually. Obviously, if you wanted a bit more magicka and stamina, then you'd need to choose a different food. There's quite a lot of different options, but I like this because I'm trying to push my magicka recovery up. So I've got increased max health by almost 5k, and then another 451 magicka recovery. If we buff up the character, and we use a potion as well, on our stats there, as you can see, 2.6k magicka recovery, 32.4 spell, 31.6 physical, and then our stats, 17k magicka, 26.9k health, and 19.7k stamina. You can adjust those stats to accommodate your own needs as well, but the way that I'm kind of working this build is because my magic recovery is so high, and with the jewelry that I'm using as well, I'm going to be getting so many resources back. Having lower stat pools isn't that much of an issue. Having the high max health means I don't have to block as much. Having the high resistances means I don't need to be blocking as much because I'm reducing down that incoming damage. So I've gone 64 into health, but you can adjust that if you wanted to. You could just sit at that 40k. 40k health is a good number to aim for. But like I say, I don't want to be permanently blocking with this build, so I've kind of hit that 46.9. And then the way that the build plays out, it's gonna benefit me that I can take more hits without blocking. I'm gonna be able to heal for more as well because I've stacked health so high. My healing does more. Things are benefiting me more in that kind of way. For the potions, obviously tri-stat potions are really beneficial, giving you all 3 stats and all 3 recoveries. If you didn't want to use those and you wanted to go with something else, you could use Essence of Magicka. So the way that this build is going to work in a minute, I'll show you, but you could use one potion and then the other potion, and those benefits would run for a good long period of time. So as you see here, grants minor heroism, restoring 1 ultimate every 1.5 seconds for 47.6 seconds. So we could actually use both of these potions and have both things active at the same time. So that is one of the things you can do. With my gear, obviously I've gone with the perfected Vaishran one-hander and shield. It's just too good not to use this. It's absolutely fantastic for ad stacking. You press one button, everything's stacked. This is especially good on classes like the Nightblade, where your only other option is to use Silver Leash, which costs a lot of stamina. And when you've got to pull 6 things in, you're out of stamina. So by using this, you press one skill. It's great for your sustain because you're just pressing that one button to pull everything in. So fantastic gear set. And it also, like if you've got the perfected version, you might not have it. You don't need to have perfected. Perfected is just adding in that extra health, but you don't need to use perfected if you don't have it. Just using the basic set is very, very useful. So when you deal damage with Power Bash, you apply Call of the Void to yourself for 2 seconds. Enemies within 12 meters are pulled in immediately. You don't spam this when you walk into a combat situation. You wait a few seconds. So you want to be attacking stuff ahead of time. So you attack something in the distance, you walk in, everything's started coming towards you, you Power Bash, you pull it all in. It also applies Major Maim, which reduces the damage that those enemies are doing as well. So really, really good. Fantastic gear set. The next gear set I'm using on my back bar is Drake's Rush. So I don't use it on the front bar because it's got a cooldown. It's like goes onto a cooldown, so I don't need to use it 100% of the time. I just need it temporarily. So Drake's Rush is the next gear set, and I really like this one as well. So you get increased max health, increased max stamina twice, and then when you bash an enemy, you and up to 3 group members within 15 meters gain major heroism for 12 seconds, granting 3 ultimate every 1.5 seconds, and this can occur once every 18 seconds. So it's got a short downtime. Now, this is really, really good for 4-person content. If you actually look at the benefit that it does, if your group are using their ultimates on cooldown, and they're using damage ultimates, especially if you're with 3 DDs, you use this, your group's going to be getting around a 4% DPS increase. It's better than quite a lot of other gear sets, because although like people commonly use things like your powerful assaults, your Yolna Kryn, things like that, this actually is like quite competitive in the way that it performs in a 4-person group. Obviously, if people are too far away or they don't use their ultimates, it can become quite ineffective. So it does require a bit of coordination when your group are close enough within that 15 meters. 15 meters is a huge range though. They need to be within those 15 meters. They get major heroism. It's a huge amount of ultimate, and especially it works well now. So last couple of patches it wasn't good because people using Oaken Soul already had major heroism, so this set went in the bin. Now it's back again because there's no major heroism on Oaken Soul anymore, so you can bring this back in and make use of it again. So this is really beneficial for us as well, so we can use our ultimate faster. And like I mentioned before, this is quite a bit of this is more of an Ultigen build. This is one of the main priorities of the build, is to generate ultimate as fast as possible. And we're using that on the jewelry, and we're using it on the eye staff. Next, we've got Baron Thirsk. You can use Baron Thirsk, or you can use Magma Incarnate for the one piece. We're just using one piece here, and we're using this for the increased stamina and increased magicka recovery. So we get 129 of both just by using the one piece, and that is because we are using the Spulder of Ruin on the shoulder. The Spulder of Ruin, really, really nice gear set. You activate it by crouching, and it's got a 12-meter radius. So it puts the radius on the ground for people to stand inside. They're going to get 260 weapon and spell damage. So we're giving people ulti gain, we're giving people weapon and spell damage. And then you are going to lose a bit of recovery by doing this. But it's mostly, you're mostly kind of getting that back from your Baron Thirsk. So it's not really that big of an issue. And then the final gear set is Turning Tide. So again, another set that requires you to bash. So we've got 2 bashing sets that you need. You need to bash with this. We keep this one on the body so that it doesn't matter what the situation is. We can kind of activate it, no problem. So we get increased max health again, increased max stamina, increased max health. So loads of stats involved with both of the gear sets that we're using. When you block, you gain flowing water for 10 seconds, causing your next bash attack to deal magic damage. Up to 6 enemies in a 5 by 10 meter line, so quite a big span in front of you. And it applies the major vulnerability for 10 seconds, increasing the damage taken by 10%. So obviously, we're not using something here that's going to keep this at 100% uptime, but what it does mean is every ad pull, we're going to have this available. And then on boss fights, we're going to have this with a reasonably high uptime, and we're going to be able to spam our ultimate, and we're going to be able to give a lot of benefits to our group. Now, what you could do on boss fights is you could switch your Spulder of Ruin to a different set. You could use Nazare, or you could use Arch Druid if you wanted to, and also you could switch your Vatashran weapons to master weapons, because obviously the Vatashran weapons aren't going to do anything on a boss fight that has no adds, so you can switch those over and convert it so that you've got the master weapons to give you additional healing, additional resistances and things like that instead if you wanted to. In terms of the gear, I'm using Decisive on the one-hander because I'm using Drake's Rush. I'm potentially going to be using the Minor Heroism potions as well. I'm going to be gaining ultimate back in lots of different ways, so Decisive is going to tick quite frequently because when you gain ultimate, you have a 27.5% chance to gain 1 additional ultimate. So this is going to proc quite frequently because Drake's Rush doesn't just give you a boost of ultimate, it's ticking. It's a ticking amount of ultimate, so it's got an increased chance to be proccing Decisive, and it's the same if you're using Minor Heroism in there as well, and you've got these other sources of ulti gain, light attacking, blocking, all those kinds of things. Every time you gain an ultimate, additional chance. So that's why I use that. In terms of the enchant, because I'm gaining so many resources back from potions, I'm going to show you why in a minute. I haven't gone with like an absorb stamina or anything like that. I just went with weakening. You don't need to use weakening You could use quite a few different options. I didn't go with like a charge shock either because I'm going to be getting that debuff on the enemy already, so I don't need that. So I did go with weakening to reduce the enemy's damage because we are going to be stacking a ton of enemy damage reduction. You're going to make the enemy do the least amount of damage possible. You're going to be taking away so much damage from the enemy. I thought we might as well add in a weakening in there. Now, obviously, weakening performs better on an infused weapon, but I just really wanted that decisive. So if you wanted to use infused weakening, you could do. If you wanted to use something else, you could do. If you wanted to use defending to bring those resistances up to the absolute cap, you could do. That's up to you, but this is the one that I've gone with. Obviously, on the back bar, infused crusher is the only option to reduce the enemy's resistances so they take more damage. Really, really strong debuff to have in there, so that's why we've gone with that. On all of our other pieces, so on our shield, on all of the body pieces, that is in Divines and Tri-Stat. Divines with the Atronach Mundus Stone, pushing our recovery up really, really high. Having Tri-Stat is better because the overall amount of stats that we get over 2,000 more overall total stats than we do if we just went with like a one-stat enchant. So even though we're getting like less magicka, we're getting less health, we're getting less overall stamina, by using a tri-stat, we're getting 2,000 plus more overall stats combined. So that's why we go with those. If you didn't want to use those, obviously use something else, but you probably wouldn't need health enchants. So maybe use some magicka, some stamina enchants in there if you wanted to. And then on the jewelry, we've got infused potion cooldown. So we're using 3 infused, and it's all potion cooldown. And as I mentioned before, the reason why that's so useful is we can use a potion and then it's going to come back really, really quickly. So we use a tri-stat potion, and then you can see there, we're going to get the next one back. And then we can also use the essence of magicka potion as well. So we can be kind of use one, then the other, then use one, then the other, and you've got to be using them on cooldown. But one of the big reasons for this is because in your skills, we've got this catalyst passive. After drinking a potion, you gain 20 ultimate. That's the main reason why we're kind of set up in this kind of way, is that our sustain is fantastic because we're using potions so frequently, and then we're also getting loads of ultimate because we're getting 20 ultimate every time we use a potion. So we're able to keep switching between our potions, or you can just be spamming your tri-stat potions if you really want the stamina and the health back, or you can be using like just switch between the 2 different potions that we were using, and that's going to give you a multitude of different benefits for your build. Potion cooldown reduction, each one is 8 seconds, so it takes our potion time down to 21 seconds, which is just really, really good, really, really strong. But obviously it's not useful if you're not using a potion on cooldown. As I mentioned before, this is why the Argonian could potentially be used with this, because you would gain even more benefit on top of that. So you'd be getting the ultimate, and you'd be getting the additional resources, and using potion on cooldown, and then using a potion every 21 seconds. You kind of like multi-layering that benefit, but it's not something I personally like to do, but you could do if you wanted to. Right, for our skills, we've got a couple of different options here that we're going to switch things around, like between adpulls and boss fights. So obviously Pierce Armor is your must-have skill. It's your taunt, and it debuffs with Minor Breach and Major Breach, which also stacks with Crusher. Really, really strong. Then we've got Lotus Fan, and this you've got to time this skill a little bit, because if you teleport during a heavy attack, you're not essentially blocking during the teleportation, so you've got to be a bit careful. It has only got a 0.4 second cast time, so it's not too bad, and it's an AoE debuff, so that's why we use it in adpulls, because it's an AoE debuff. It applies minor vulnerability. So we can apply minor vulnerability with this skill in an adpull. We can also apply major vulnerability with our gear set, with one of our gear sets. Leeching Strikes is on there because it gives us some nice passive benefits, but also it's a really, really strong thing to use. It only costs 860 stamina. If you just leave it to run, it's going to restore 4,270 additional stamina when it ends. So when it comes to the end of the skill, you'll get a big burst of stamina. So if you time this right, where you're using a potion and you've got this running as well, so like this could proc in between your potion usage. There should be never a time when you're struggling for stamina on a build like this, where you're using a potion every 21 seconds. This is giving you 4k stamina every 21 seconds. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of incoming resources. And if you're doing light and heavy attacks as well, like as you should be, light and heavy attacking in between the boss attacks, you're going to be getting healing from your light and heavy attacks and stamina. So every light attack and every heavy attack is going to give you health and stamina back from while this is running. Your main heal for this build is Dark Cloak. Obviously the heal has been overall kind of nerfed if you're moving around. So it's like it's a ticking overtime heal. Now, because we've got such high health, we're going to get a huge benefit from this heal when we're stood still, because it's going to be hitting us for 150% more when we're not moving. So when we are in a boss fight, when we mostly need this, we're going to cast it. We're going to be getting huge amounts of healing. The fact is, you also get minor protection from this as well, which is really nice, reducing your incoming damage by 5%. On top of it, procs your passive, which gives you your major resolve. So you get major resolve by casting this skill as well. It's like a triple thing. It's a heal over time, it's minor protection, it's major resolve, all into one skill, which is really, really nice. It is kind of on the expensive side. 3,969 magicka. But as I mentioned before, we're going to have so much incoming resources, it shouldn't really be an issue. Next we've got Firesong. This is purely used just for proccing our Void Bash set, the Vatashran Sword and Board. Now, this will also proc your gear sets though, because this now essentially classes as an actual bash attack. It's the same thing as bashing as you would do with your shield manually. So it will proc Turn Inside, it will proc Drake's Rush. Those gear sets will proc from using this, as well as Void Bash. All three things will proc from the same thing. And on the front bar, we've got Incapacitating Strikes. Now, you could use Barrier if you wanted just purely Magicka Recovery. The reason I've gone with this is I like to be light attack weaving in between my skills to proc, to gain back resources from Leeching Strikes. And because I'm doing that, it makes more sense to use Incap, because we're also going to get Reeve, which restores 100 Magicka and 100 Stamina when you deal light attack damage, or heavy attack damage. So, the fact you're able to combine Leeching Strikes and Incap to gain resources, really strong. So that's why I use it. It's just giving you more and more resources. On the back bar, Frost Clench, unbelievable skill. So it's a taunt, it immobilizes enemies, and it causes major maim. But it also causes minor maim, because the chilled effect is a guaranteed thing that happens when you cast this skill. It's a guarantee. So you'll cause a chilled effect, you'll minor maim the enemies, and you'll major maim them, and you'll cause minor brill. So you'll do all three things with this skill, but it's single target. This is mostly for bosses. And that leads us on to the next skill, which is Frost Pulsar. So our fantastic way of crowd control is Blockade and Pulsar. So when you blockade on the ground and you do a Pulsar, it will chill the enemies and cause them to be immobilized. Because with Blockade of Frost, chilled enemies become frozen and or immobilized for 4 seconds. And with Frost Pulsar, this does a ton of things as well. Minor Mangle reduces the enemy's health. It causes minor protection to your group. Not that you really need it for yourself, but your group get it. And then, like I say, this has a triple chance to proc the chilled effect, which gives you AoE minor maim and AoE minor brittle as well. So it's increasing your group's damage on ad pulls. You don't use this on bosses though. You would use Frost Clench on bosses and use Frost Pulsar on ad pulls. Blockade again does a number of things. You need to keep it on the ground for your Crusher. It needs to stay on the ground 100% of the time, and it's going to keep ticking that Crusher enchant so that your group do more damage. It's also going to give your group a projectile shield that's a 12k damage shield for projectiles, which can be useful, and it's also going to give some minor benefits on your passives as well. Mirage is the next skill. I really like this skill. It gives you minor resolve. It gives you major evasion. So what this means is, in your champion points, you don't need to use the CP to reduce your AoE damage, because you've already got major evasion, which is reducing the AoE damage that you take by 20%, which is way more than what you'll get from your CP. So it means we can use the blue CP to do other things. The minor resolve gives us more resistances, so we're virtually at the resistance cap, because we've got major resolve, we've got minor resolve. While active, taking direct damage reduces the cost of your next roll dodge by 10% up to a maximum of 100%. So we don't need to use the free roll dodge CP either, because we can virtually get it just from the passive. There's a number of benefits that we're getting here by using Mirage. Next we've got Refreshing Path. This had a nice little update recently. You get Major Expedition for yourself and your group. It heals as well. The minor endurance and minor intellect's giving us more recovery. I didn't have this down on the ground before as well when I actually showed you what my Magicka recovery was, so it'd be even more than what we saw before. But the speed boost through ad pulls is very, very useful. So this is just the ad pull setup. So we've got a huge speed boost. We've got some huge debuffs with Pulsar, with Blockade, with Lotus Fan, with our gear sets. There's just so many things happening. And like I say, it heals as well. So it's a nice little heal that you can stand in. It heals over time. It's cheaper than Dark Cloak. It heals for longer, but it's also giving those additional benefits. And then finally, our main ultimate, Aggressive Horn. We're going to try and spam this as often as possible because we're going to be gaining ultimate very, very quickly with all the different things that we've pieced together here with this build. And yeah, some of the obviously important passives, like Master Assassin, isn't really particularly useful. Executioner, you can, like this can be quite handy for ad pulls. Like if you are burning through resources during ad pulls, you're going to get 1,000 magical stamina back when an enemy dies within 2 seconds of being damaged by you. So you don't have to be the person who kills the enemy, they just have to be damaged by you within 2 seconds when they die. Pressure points, increasing your weapon and spell critical rating. So, like, that's not something that you're necessarily really focusing on, but you do need to be doing critical damage because you want to be proccing your hemorrhage passive. This is one of your unique group buffs. So the hemorrhage passive, it increases your group's critical damage by 1/314. Shadow passives, obviously refreshing shadows increases your recovery, is really useful. Shadow barrier gives you that major resolve like we mentioned before, and it's going to stack based on how many heavy armor you're using. Obviously we're using 511, so we don't have as much duration on this as we would do if we were using like a 7 heavy setup, but 511 is far better for your overall, like, because you get a lot of other benefits and perks. You get a lot more stats from using 511, so it is kind of more useful to use 511 than 7 heavy personally, because you've already got plenty of damage reduction. Going 511 is more resource beneficial. Using 7 heavy is more defensive, but you don't need it because I'm gonna switch a couple of skills around in a second and show you. Dark Vigor increases your max health when you've got skills from this skill line on your bar, so we get a bit of extra max health. Increases the duration of your non-invisibility shadow ability, so that's really, really useful because of Dark Cloak. We get the extended duration of Dark Cloak. The base duration is 5 seconds, so it's going to go up to 8 seconds because of that passive. And then on Siphoning, we've got Catalyst. This is the most important passive, really, for this build because we're using a certain setup to benefit from the Catalyst passive. We're going to get ultimate every time we drink a potion, so we're going to be using potions every 21 seconds to gain that ultimate back. Magicka Flood increases your max magicka by 8%, while a Siphoning ability is slotted. So obviously you want to try and have ability from this skill on each bar, so you've got an increase in that max magicka. Soul Siphon increases your healing done. Obviously that's something that's nice to have if you've got the skills. That's why we kind of put Leeching Strikes on the front bar. So on the front bar, we've got that increased healing done on the front bar. On the back bar, we don't really spend a ton of time on the back bar, so it's not really as needed on the back bar. Transfer, so more ultimate gain. So casting Siphon ability, 1 in combat generates 2 ultimate once every 4 seconds. So we can obviously spam this as well if we're using skills that can use that. So Swallowed Soul can be used on your bar for boss fights, for example, so that you can spam that ulti gain as well. Now, when you move on to a boss fight, the skills that aren't going to be useful here include on your front bar, you're not going to need Power Slam, so you might switch that for Mass Hysteria. And on your back bar, you're not going to need Pulsar, so you might use Power Extraction. Now, the benefits of using these two skills, so as we showed you before, for your crowd control, you're going to use Blockhead and Pulsar because Mass Hysteria isn't good. It's a fear skill. Fear doesn't work when you've chained in an enemy. So when you've used Void Bash and you pulled the enemy in, you cannot crowd control those enemies then with Mass Hysteria. It doesn't work. So you need an immobilization. That's how we get our immobilization with Blockade and Pulsar. With Mass Hysteria, we do use it on boss fights, and we don't use it for the fear. We use it for the Major Cowardice. Now, this is a huge enemy debuff when we're combining it with all these other things. So, Major Cowardice is going to reduce the weapon and spell damage of the enemy by 430. If we then also switch to the back bar, I've now slotted Power Extraction. This can be tricky because this is a stamina costing skill, but I've already showed you we're going to be getting tons and tons and tons of resources. So you should be able to maintain this quite okay. Now, when you use this, you're going to apply Minor Cowardice, which reduces the enemy's incoming damage by another 215. These are like the opposites to Minor and Major Courage. So you've got Major and Minor Courage, which are the same values, but they're the opposite. They buff the group, and these ones debuff the enemy. So you're going to reduce weapon and spell damage by a lot. So when we think about the damage reduction this build is going to do, this is a huge benefit to both you and your group, because any like AoE attacks that a boss might do, any like things that the bosses do externally, are going to be impactful for your group as well as yourself. So when you look at damage reduction, we are going to be doing major cowardice, we're going to be doing minor cowardice, and then with Frost Clench, we're doing major and minor maim. And if we use a weakening enchant as well, we're reducing weapon and spell damage by even more. So this is going to take the boss's damage down super, super low. And with the Nightblade tank's passives and all the different skills, like I said, we've got that minor resolve, that major evasion, you've got that protection in there, that minor protection. We've got so many things built into this character that is going to reduce boss damage. You should have no trouble at all surviving. It should be a very, very strong build in terms of survivability. Okay, on the champion points. Green CP, obviously, you take whatever you want, but a really good one for this now is going to be liquid efficiency. Whenever you use a potion or poison, you have a 10% chance not to consume it. Obviously, that's really useful because we're using a potion every 21 seconds. So this is going to have a higher chance to proc because we're using potions so frequently. Obviously, this can become quite an expensive build to play if you're using a lot of potions. So liquid efficiency is really handy to have with this because the whole point of the build is to be absolutely tanning through your potions to get the ultimate benefit and use your ultimate more often. So that is something that you might want to consider using. On your blue CP, as I mentioned before, you don't really need unassailable because we've got that 20% damage reduction to AoE already. So having another 6% isn't going to be that beneficial. So we do have Ironclad, we do have Duelist Rebuff, Enduring Resolve, and we do have Bulwark in there. Now, other important ones that you really, really want to have here, you've got to have things like, not Battle Mastery, sorry, Flawless Ritual. Increase your chance to apply magical status effects. Without this, you're going to have a hard time getting the Blockade and Pulsar to cause the immobilization effect because you need to create the Chilled effect. That is a magical status effect. The Chilled effect is a magical status effect that you need to use to make them enemy chilled so that you can immobilize them. So having Flawless Ritual is essential at this point. On your red CP, obviously Boundless Vitality for the increased max health, Fortified for the armor again, Rejuvenation for the guaranteed increase in recoveries, and then obviously everything that doesn't need to be slotted should be in there. I have gone with a Celerity here, but another option is to also switch it on boss fights to Bracing Anchor, but you don't really want to use Bracing Anchor on ad pulls because Bracing Anchor on ad pulls isn't that great. When you use Bracing Anchor on an ad pull, you're really slow and you want to be really fast, especially because you're going to have your refreshing path on the ground. If you combine that with Celerity, you're going to be zapping through ad pulls and you're going to be getting everything stacked up really quickly. So you can slot Bracing Anchor, you can pull that into your build and get the use out of that as well. But in terms of your red CP, there isn't really many other things that are worth taking. It's not worth taking Expert Evasion, like I said. You can almost get your free dodge roll already with the Mirage skill. So you don't really need that. You don't really need... I don't really like using Sustained by Suffering, although it's more overall stats, more overall recoveries. You can't rely on it 100% of the time, even though like negative effects are very frequent in the game. I'd prefer to have something that's a guarantee to be there. And then other things aren't really that useful. Obviously, you don't have shields. You're not really going to make use of anything else. And so that is it for the champion points. Right. Guys, that is, I think, everything. That is everything for this Nightblade tank build. This was the WRAITH Nightblade tank build. And this is mostly, like I say, for dungeon content. It's a fun build to play. Really fast Ultigen. Really fast getting through content. Really nice. All that kind of stuff. So make sure you give it a try. And thanks for watching.